Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to welcome each of you to Meliora Weekend. And Meliora Weekend at the University of Rochester is always special, but it is especially special this year as we are celebrating 100 years. So this is extra special for us. The school officially turned 100 on Monday of this And it is so special to be able to share this week with each of you, our alumni, our friends, our staff, our faculty, our community friends. So we have an exciting weekend planned. We have a very busy day here in the School of Nursing. I know many of you have been here very bright and early since 8 a.m. So I hope that you had the opportunity to take a tour and see our facilities and interact with our faculty and students. I may be biased, but I am for sure we have the best faculty, staff, and students in the country. And I'm certainly glad that they had an opportunity to show each of you what they come here every day to do. And it is such an honor to be part of a faculty that every day, regardless of what they're doing, they're at 110%. So that certainly keeps me energized and our students energized, and I'm glad many of you had an opportunity to do those tours. So I would like to welcome you to our 67th, I'm going to get to the next slide, our 67th Clare Dennison lecture. I know, we've been at this for a bit. And Clare Dennison, the lecture, is an annual tradition that honors one of our earliest leaders, Clare Dennison. She succeeded Helen Wood as Director of Nursing Service in 1931. And she is remembered for her leadership in nursing education and for establishing one of the first recovery rooms in the nation. Each year, this lecture recognizes the vision and courage of nursing leaders who have shaped our school. Today, this is very special because we are going to continue that tradition by honoring our founding dean, Dean Loretta Lee Ford. As many of you know, that's certainly, I don't know, I have many favorite photos. This certainly ranks up there. But as many of you know, Lee passed away this past January at the remarkable age of 104. And I have to tell you, and many of her friends are here today, up until maybe a few months before she passed, Jean, she was still sending me emails, encouraging me, maybe telling me how to do things better. I mean, right up until maybe a month, right after her, right around her 104th birthday, right? Yeah, right. Oh, there you go. Good. Right before, up to her birthday, she was still sending ideas on how we can move nursing forward, how we can strengthen the school. Lee was never done, constantly pushing us forward, and never done reimagining what nursing could be. We are very honored today to have her daughter Val and Val's husband Chris with us. Val, Chris, thank you. We are so excited that you were able to make the trip. I know it's been such a bit of time since you've been back in the area, and this is truly the house that Lee built. So we are happy this morning that you were able to spend time with us, and yesterday and throughout the day. We are so honored that you shared Lee with us for so many years. She has really changed a profession, and I can tell you Lee came here, let me go back to my notes so I don't forget anything, to Rochester because she saw an environment where she could be bold, where change was possible, Here, she was able to put in the idea of unification, bringing education, research, and practice together, knowing that that was essential for each of us to improve care. Under her leadership, the school became an independent academic unit. And I mentioned some first already, but she launched some of the nation's very first programs, including nurse practitioner programs, and she established our PhD program here at the School of Nursing, understanding the important need for nursing science and nursing research. And because of that, Rochester to this day is a national model for how nursing can lead in an academic medical center. So we are forever grateful for her vision and her legacy. I think it's also important for us to hear directly from Lee. So I'm going to turn on the video.
The administration of the university had really made a commitment to founding a new school, and that I found very exciting, because it gave you an opportunity to be a founding dean and to really develop something new and unusual, but very avant-garde. And of course, I'm very interested in doing things that haven't been done before. These were the years of Camelot, really. And I think it was a perfect time for nursing, because there are so many changes in the profession.
That it is not easy to bring about change, and it's not easy to convince people that this was nursing. And eventually that's what drove me to Rochester, because Rochester had a value and a history of expertise in clinical nursing.
Loretta Ford, the University of Rochester proudly salutes your career in nursing and your contributions to nursing education, admits you to the degree Doctor of Science, and confers upon you its right, privileges, and responsibilities.
So as citizens and health professionals, we have a lot of work to do. This university must assume the responsibility to prepare this type of nurse for the future. I hope this medical center and this community will embrace new ideas and innovations that will improve not only the health of the community, but all communities around the globe.
I thought 100 years was a long time, but it's a very short time to get everything done. Well, I think the University of Rochester School of Nursing is well positioned to take the future on and to create the future that we really need for this nation. So I expect great things to continue at Rochester.
I had the great pleasure of sitting next to Lee Ford all during dinner, and I learned so much about the work that she did, which was then amplified in the video, the extraordinary pioneering efforts that she brought to creating the concept and then implementing the idea of nurse practitioners. But she really endeared herself to me forever when she said, "I've been kicked and kissed, reviled and revered, cursed and credited."
For the passion to bring about improved health care to people through changes in nursing education, practice, and health care delivery.
So now, we would like to do something fun. I want you to take out your phones. I want you to scan the QR code. And you're going to go to a poll everywhere. And I want you all to type in a word that describes Lee and what she meant to you, or perhaps what she did for your career. And once I see the phones go down, I'll click over to the responses.
I think I'll skip it. Just one word that you can describe Lee.
Everyone have the code scan?
Leadership. Compassion. Compassion.
Oh. So by far, I think we see many words there, but, right, visioning, inspirational, pioneer, and to think of how she led with courage for such a long period of time. We're certainly honored to be able to pay tribute to what Lee did to shape the profession of nursing. So now, as you continue to look at this, it's my privilege to introduce our distinguished panelists. And what we wanted to do, as we knew we were celebrating our centennial, and what timely, it's interesting, I said this to Nora this morning, Lee timed everything. It's almost that, we get the honor to honor Lee as we kick off our next 100 years. And she was certainly so influential in our first 100 years to have the ability to do this panel today as part of this lecture and think about the groundwork that Lee laid for us and what that means for our next 100 years. So we have been very honored to put together a panel to talk about that very topic. And I would now like to introduce our panel. And panelists, you can take your seats up front as I introduce you. Dr. Maddie Schmidt is a former professor and the Independence Foundation Chair in Nursing and Interprofessional Education at the School of Nursing. As an assistant dean for graduate education, she played a pivotal role in the school's development as an independent school, working very closely with founding dean Loretta Ford. Beginning in the 1970s, Dr. Schmidt focused her scholarship on interprofessional collaboration, collaborative practice models, and went on to become an international consultant in this area. Dr. Schmidt, thank you for joining us. Dr. Eileen Sullivan-Marks is Dean Emeritus and Professor at NYU Rory Myers College of Nursing, where she led the school from 2012 to 2023 as Dean. That is an amazing run, Dean Sullivan-Marks. Knowing that I'm entering year 4, that's an amazing run. Dr. Sullivan-Marks. She is also Professor Emeritus at University of Pennsylvania. Eileen is a nationally recognized leader in nursing education and health policy. She is known for advancing innovative models of primary care and redesigning payment systems for nurses through Medicaid and Medicare. During her tenure at NYU, she elevated the school's national profile and guided it through pivotal moments, including Superstorm Sandy and the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome and thank you for coming back to the U of R. Dr. Meredith Kells is an assistant professor at the University of Rochester School of Nursing and a pediatric nurse practitioner in adolescent medicine at Golisano Children's Hospital. With more than 15 years of experience caring for adolescents and young adults with eating disorders, she leads a research program focused on improving outcomes during nutritional restoration. She is also a dedicated educator and mentor, teaching across, I think, all of our programs, PhD, DNP, PNP, and preparing the next generation of nursing scholars and practitioners. Each of our panelists bring a very unique perspective, from those who knew Lee personally to those who continue to carry her work forward today. With that said, let's begin our conversation. All right, so this first question I have is for each of you on the panel. So when you think of Lee Ford and her legacy, what is the first story, lesson, or image that comes to mind for you personally? Maddie, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't know if this is on. Oh, can you hear me? I came to the U of R School of Nursing as Assistant Director of Graduate Education 6 months before Lee arrived as Dean. And she came that spring with Bill, her husband, to check us out and figure out what she was going to do. And she arrived wrapped in a fur stole. And when you asked me about images, that was the first image that came to mind. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, that's the precursor to the Superwoman cape.
Yeah.
Which you showed on the slides.
Yeah.
So that's my first image of Lee. She arrived ready to work.
With a statement.
Yeah.
With a statement, yep.
I'm trying to think of my first visual image, and I'm not sure that's my first image, because I came to Rochester as a newbie in 1978 from Philadelphia. I was a diploma hospital graduate, finished in 72, went on for my baccalaureate at Penn. But I knew I wanted to be a nurse practitioner from the time I was in a diploma school, so I had been reading things, and actually I had done an independent study in nurse practitioners. And one of the things those of you who, like Meredith, are new, is there was a lot of controversy. So when Lee said there was controversy, there was real controversy in the writings and the literature. Read the American Journal of Nursing's 1976 issue, because it's all the debates about where nursing was going. And so my advisor said to me that you should look at the University of Rochester and the other schools that were funded by Robert Wood Johnson and the Herseth at the time, because they were considered the premier primary care training places. University of Washington, Rochester, I think University of Maryland, University of Colorado, where Lee had been. And so my influence and image of Lee was like this entity. I didn't know what she looked like. I didn't know her as a person, but I had been doing the reading and I came here. And then I think, we'll tell more stories later, I think then my first image was just this very, very formal person at a podium giving us lectures on policy and leadership in the MP program in 1978, and sort of the contrast of those of us in the audience who were wearing 1978 get-up, and that's my first visual image. But really, it was her influence was the first image.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge, thank you. I stand on the shoulder of giants, and thank you, Dean Kiko, for the invitation to be here. And I'm honored to sit on this panel with both of you. As a newer faculty here, I had the honor and privilege, absolute privilege of my career to spend a short amount of time with Dr. Ford on Zoom shortly after I arrived. One of my mentors here, Dr. Rich Cripey, who is a professor emeritus at Colasano in the Division of Adolescent Medicine, brought myself and my two NP colleagues, Amy Realbuto and Dr. Heather Wensley, onto a Zoom meeting with Dr. Ford. I was starstruck. And I anticipated it being a really cordial, just conversational, but when we got on the Zoom, as Dean Kitko acknowledged, Dr. Ford was right in it with us, had great questions, really challenged me to think about our practice. We talked about being pediatric nurse practitioners, we talked about adolescent medicine, and what I thought was a casual meet and greet turned into a really intellectually wonderful conversation. So that's the first thing I think of when I think of Dr. Ford, but when I think about her legacy, I think about what Dr. Sullivan Marks just referenced, the 1976 issue, where Dr. Ford had written to have challenging and intellectually stimulating careers. And that's always my thought when I think about her legacy. It's the unification model, but it's really that we can have satisfying and intellectually challenging careers simultaneously, and how important that is for us and for the communities that we serve.
Thank you. Thank you. This next question, Maddie, is for you. And you were side by side with Lee as she brought her vision to the University of Rochester. Can you recall, and maybe I'll just limit it to one whirlwind moment early on, a challenge, a breakthrough, when you were building the master's and the doctoral programs? And what did you learn from her leadership time during that moment?
Well, when she arrived, we had an environment here that I think you mentioned was really right for her vision. I was assistant dean for graduate studies. I was finishing my own doctoral work, and she said, everybody stay in place. That meant no new help. I was inexperienced as a leader. I was assistant dean for graduate studies, and suddenly we were off and running, building nurse practitioner master's programs. I am not a nurse practitioner. I am a nurse sociologist. And when she said, everybody stay in place, I thought, whoa, what have I gotten myself into? But those early years, she depended on who is here, and she set about putting us on the map, writing the circuit, networking, bringing grants home, and left it to us to roll them out. She was out there advocating for us and making Rochester a national entity when it had been at the graduate level, a regional and small master's program.
Thank you. Dr. Sullivan Marks, this one is for you. You mentioned that you chose Rochester specifically because of Dr. Ford and her leadership. What qualities or stories about Lee inspired you at that pivotal career choice? And how did her example really shape your journey?
We could talk for hours about this, and actually we did talk for an hour about some of this yesterday on SiriusXM app. I happen to be a host for the Nurse Practitioner Show on Dr. Radio once a month, and we recorded it here at Helen Hood Hall, and I had Beth Palermo on my show for the first hour. There's Beth, her first podcast. Dr. Julie Fairman, who's a colleague of mine from Penn, who's a nurse historian, to talk about those early days. So what I wanted talk with you all a little bit today, and I led into this. So I arrived, I'm 26 years old, 27 years old. I had a lot of nursing experience, and I was really gung-ho. I told you I did work as an independent study nurse practitioner. Prior to my year coming here, I had to pay back money to the Public Health Service for a grant that I got for going back for my BSN. So I decided to be bold, and I went to Gallup, New Mexico for a year and was at the Indian Health Service as a baccalaureate RN in the emergency room outpatient department in the referral hospital for the entire Navajo Nation, Kogi and Zuni too. So I walked into this building ready to dig in and do clinical. And isn't that what your nurse practitioners, Beth, want to do? You know, I wanted to, because I had been testing the waters. And all of a sudden, I'm in a class on policy and leadership with Dr. Ford, as I said, dressed very professionally and formally, and I'm in some kind of, I don't know what I wore because I had no clothes but a nursing uniform and some jeans. And no money, and but my tuition was being paid for while I was here, but didn't have a stipend any longer. And we listened to Dr. Ford start talking to us about the importance of policy and leadership and this and that, and we were a little restless. Just like our students are, just like the students that later on as a director of an MP program at Penn, I could see them just going on and I started talking about payment. So here was a pivotal change for me, and she was not going to let up on making sure that we had to do the work in this course, because not all NP programs were paying attention to all this policy stuff. And we had to do a paper. We had to write a paper on some policy issue. And we were like, whatever. I don't know what to write about. And writing hadn't done it in a while. But anyway, I was talking with my mother. This is a story I tell over and over again. And my mother, who had done hospital billing when she was a young woman, said to me, well, if you're going to be doing all this new thing as a nurse practitioner and doing what doctors are going to be doing, how are you going to get paid? And I said, well, I don't know. Because if you're working in doctors bill insurance, are you going to be able to bill insurance? That was my mother who asked that question as a biller. So I thought, well, I'll write a paper on how to get paid as a nurse practitioner if we're going to do the same thing. And that was my first policy paper on payment, which then became what I did on policy work for the rest of my career and still doing today. Now I reminded Dr. Ford that I got a B+ in that paper. I kept the paper for a long time. What the paper was an opinion passion piece, and she said to me, you're passionate, but get more meat on the bone.
Thank you for that. And really, to this day, you have shaped.
Yep, I completely shaped how, that was my question.
Yes.
My question was, how do we get paid?
Yes.
I said it in front of Congress, I said, you pay a plumber to do the work, you pay us to do the work. I mean, it's as, but yes, I represented ANA to the resource-based relative value system, the first nurse to do that, to show how both nurses and nurse practitioners and clinical nurse specialists could fit into that system. Worked at state levels for including nurses in insurance, nurse practitioners in insurance programs, and nurse practitioners in databases, and I could go on and on about why we're at 85% and how Incident 2 happened. And you're one of the few people in the room when that all took place. So, yes, continue to do that. And then, I think really importantly, and we've talked about this, is the unification model that stuck with me throughout, and that's why I loved Rochester, was because you did integration of practice, research, and education, and what I continue to do everywhere that I went.
Thank you. Thank you. And that is really a testament to Lee's legacy, right? So thank you. Dr. Kells, next question is for you. You care for adolescents and young adults, and much of Lee's work was about meeting community needs in new ways. I think Jean was telling me, she was talking about public health until her final days. So that was very important to her. How do you see her spirit of innovation shaping the way we must adapt to emerging health challenges?
I could also talk about that one all day. I think, her legacy and her approach as innovation and the unification model itself is by its very nature collaborative. It calls us to integrate those three pillars, research, teaching, and practice, but we can only do that when we are collaborators and when we're working interprofessionally and in an interdisciplinary team and with our fellow nursing colleagues. So I think that underscores the strong part of adolescent medicine is shared decision making and patient-centered care. And that's more true now than ever, that patients and families want, to know the reasoning, they want to know the evidence behind what we're doing. They want to work with us, they want to be a collaborator on their medical team, and as they should be. And so to do that collaboratively and to serve the community needs is really the way forward for not just in adolescent medicine, but in any facet of healthcare across the lifespan. And I think we see that here in so many ways by the incredible practice of our faculty and the way that they're teaching the students to do that. We see that in the research and the community partnerships across our research programs and the vast research topics that we have here. We see that also in practice. We see, the vision of Dr. Mary Tantillo, who can't be here today, who established the Western New York Comprehensive Care Center for Eating Disorders, which is, in the community, funded by New York State, comprehensive care for individuals with eating disorders for services that aren't typically paid for by insurance. So I think, all that to say that the unification model, although we talk about those three pillars, we would be remiss to say that we do any of that in silo. And that includes the collaborative action that we take with our community. Because without them and without the patients and families, then what are we doing?
Thank you, very well said, very well said. So what we thought we would do now is we have this wonderful panel with such a wealth of knowledge here in front of us, is to open it up for any questions that you may have from the audience. And know that I have more questions here as backup, but certainly wanted to give each of you to ask any questions that you might have. And I know there's mics coming around, so please wait for a mic. And when you, if you want to state your name and how you're affiliated with the School of Nursing and where you might be at in your program, that would be wonderful.
My name is Janelle. I am going to be an incoming student in January at the School of Nursing, so I'm very excited. I'm currently an undergrad student at the University of Rochester, majoring in American Sign Language and Business. But my question for any of you is, what is one piece of advice that you took along your journey that really helped you push through and persevere through everything that you have accomplished so far?
Yeah, I think Beth Palermo should answer this question. Because Beth, yesterday on the radio program, you were talking about something that Dr. Ford said, who inspired your class. She came to her class, and we were asking the same question. Thank you, Jelani, for that excellent question. And one of the things that Dr. Ford was saying, the kind of usual things: find your passion, stay with it, gather your friends, work collaboratively, stay together, and laugh and play and have fun. And one of the times of privileges that I had in my career is at the, because I focused in my career on aging care, Dr. Thelma Wells and Dr. Schmidt here, who chaired my master's thesis, influenced me in that area as well. I got to interview Dr. Ford as a nurse leader at one of our gerontology meetings. And I asked her the question, if you could do anything different or anything that you think you could have paid more attention to, what would that be? And she said, I would have played more golf. So I take that to heart and play golf. But I think she meant we have to take care of ourselves. And so I think that's a really important lesson, and one that comes from Rochester with its emphasis on wellness and permission to stay well and be well.
Congratulations on your studies as well. Thank you for that great question. I think when I've been asked this question before, I always talk about saying yes to opportunities as they arise. And I think that's really important too, to say yes. But I also think in preparing for this panel today, admittedly, we had some discussion points that we were, thought-provoking questions. And one of them was about what advice to honor Dr. Ford's legacy to students. And that got me thinking not only about saying yes, but because saying yes is about the opportunities around you that come to you, but also to think about what comes from within and honoring your own intellectual curiosity. So say yes to those opportunities, but also listen to what's coming from within you. When you have a question, when you feel a spark, when you see something that everyone says is the status quo, but you know from your experience and you have that unique vision, and you have a question about it, or you have a thought, or you have a voice in that, to honor that voice within as well. So it's about taking from the outside, but also honoring your own voice.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's a great answer.
I have a hard time thinking about a piece of advice, but I'd like to play off Meredith's idea of seizing opportunities and how that was created for me to stay in nursing during an era of the Special Nurse Research Fellowship that the federal government had that was specifically to prepare nurses in fields, what they said, allied to nursing. And there were a generation of us. I'm a nurse sociologist. We've had nurse anthropologists, nurse physiologists, nurse psychologists. And when I was in graduate school for sociology, we had here at the U of R, and this is my 60th nursing reunion here. And this speaks to the environment that Lee found here too. We had a cadre of faculty who were part of the Rochester Regional Medical Program. People like Joe Crater, Janet Long, Marge Fodler, Rose Pinio. They were innovators themselves. Rose Pinio was one of the first nurses to work in an ICU. Now, when I graduated 60 years ago, ICUs were just coming in. They were a new practice kind of approach on the block. So we had those people here, and they were, as nurses, partnered with physicians who were reaching out to the whole region and doing circuit riding in the region to improve care. And so Jo Crater was a mentor for me. I call her my mother in nursing. And when I was in graduate school, Jo would reach out to me and say, well, come and talk to my graduate students. I don't care what you talk about. Just come and tell us what you're doing. And so she invited me back into nursing when several of my generation were lost to nursing as physiologists, psychologists, and so forth. That kept me connected. And it wasn't exactly advice, but it was an opportunity that I took. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, but I talked about what I was doing in sociology, and ultimately, that's what I brought back with me into nursing when I came here in 1972 as a young faculty member. So advice comes in different forms.
Thank you, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, I see lots of hands going
Well,
up.
one of the comments I want to make between these two fabulous people on either side of me is they both are talking about what Lee Ford was able to do to create the yes among everybody. So, and the welcoming of everybody who came here, as she said, stay and play as faculty, she knew that you would create something special in research. You know, you created my research, I mean, essentially. And Maddie was my first person, you know, guiding me through how you asked the question. But I think it was all Jean Garling, Joan Lionel, Barbara Bates, all of those people who came here who were given the permission and then in their own curiosity, as you're saying, under Dr. Ford's permission, because she, you know, after I've been a dean, now recognized that what she was doing, you know, in her dean office over there at the hospital, that's where she had it, is that she was holding presence and holding it equal and holding it the same with all the physicians toe to toe. And that is advice. I mean, just the advice of being present, being there, knowing how she was respected, just gave everyone else the strength to do what they were doing.
Yeah. And I want to add, having mentioned Marge Fodler and Joe Crater and that whole cohort, they were early on, as master's prepared nurses, doing research, practice, and education. Marge was working on better flotation beds for people who were stuck in bed. Joe Crater was pioneering a teamwork role with oncologists here at the medical center. Rose Prinio brought her expertise in ICU nursing, having pioneered that role. So, and they were practitioners. So when Lee came and saw what was here, it matched her vision, and she saw an opportunity because that work in a different way and not at the level that she developed it was already going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, interesting. Thank you, thank you. Yes.
Hi there. Okay. Hi, I'm Katie Votava. I'm a twice graduate here. Maddie's taught me for my master's and my PhD. And Eileen in particular, but others, moving into the nurse practitioner role in the early 80s, which I did, we were still weird. We were different. People called us different things. We weren't even certified yet. And as I've gone into my career, I've done many things that people would think nurses don't do. So how do you keep yourself together and focused as a nurse and yet still pursue your differentness?
A great question, and we should probably talk a lot more about those years, the 1980s, in the history of the nurse practitioner movement, because we were being funded by schools and by the reports to the graduate medical education allied professional report that said we can solve a lot of the nation's health problems if we promote education to create more midwives, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, family practice, primary care. All of that was happening. So there was funding out there, money greasing the wheels that were starting to create opportunities for us to show up. And somebody was either paying us on a grant or something like that. But the issue, again, had to be what's the economics behind that? And so for me, it was always some of it was the economics and the equity issues, which we still don't have. But I also had a clinical passion for gerontology, and so a lot of us would find these little ways to make ourselves indispensable early on. I'm sure that's what you did. Mm-hmm. You had some niche and found your way to be indispensable, right?
Yeah, and niches found me.
Yeah.
You know, where the opportunities
Right.
were funded. Mine was in gerontology and home care when I first got out. I was not particularly interested in either one. I wanted to do cardiology, but there were no opportunities. So I thought, okay, I got to get a job, I got to get paid. But then I followed a path I never would have thought, and even into economics too.
And part of it is that nobody knew what we could do and nobody knew what we couldn't do, so we just did it. And I talk about when you didn't have regulations, you kind of just did it. You didn't ask permission. You just would walk in and write in the hospital record, well, you should decrease the Valium. It's causing the person to be delirious. It was how the clinical specialist would say to me, oh, can you do that? And I said, I just did it. They have too much Valium, right? Good job. Stop the Valium. And so it was that kind of attitude. But I think it's really important to also understand that we had to introduce standardization and regulation, which was going on at the same time. And so we were getting ourselves organized through the 80s. The ANA wasn't so helpful. We formed our own organizations and we formed them back, and then there was NOF and NLN, and there was a lot of stuff going on because we had to go state by state to get regulations for us to practice as nurse practitioners, which is why we have so many different things to do, and also get paid because private insurers, it was regulated at state level by insurance commissions. It wasn't at the federal level, like Medicare and Medicaid. I was advised go after, well, I recognized I had my own practice with my husband who's back there, and in New Hampshire, and I realized I could bill for everything at that point in 1987, 88, but I couldn't bill Medicare. We had to bill it under his name. And that was all before Incident 2. And so when we left that, I kept complaining, and people kept asking me about it, and I kept talking about it till I got put on commissions and such. So,
but your name was on the checking account.
Oh. That's how you do it. So anyway, I think looking at the 80s, we just did it. But as Beth talked on the show yesterday, then we had to standardize it and regulate it so it could grow. So I'll stop talking there.
Katie, I have a different take on your question, which was how do you stay centered when you find a different path? And I think one of the most disturbing things that I heard said by a nurse practitioner in training was, when I was a nurse. Mm-hmm. And Lee always made it clear that you were a nurse first and always. You were a nurse practitioner. And what I had always hoped, and what I think has stayed here at Rochester, is that you are always a nurse as you move into the practitioner role. And you bring a wealth of experience, education with you. You think as a nurse. You deliver expanded nursing care. Lee was motivated as a public health nurse to bring expanded care to the people that she cared for in rural Colorado. And that was always her vision. Nursing as an independent partner in care. So the grounding for me when I came back to talk to Joe Crater's classes was I was a nurse first. And I was becoming a sociologist, and that expanded what I could bring into nursing. But I always stayed a nurse. I still think as a nurse.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I saw another hand up, yes?
This is coming from a very old nurse.
Oh, that's not true, Connie, but go ahead. It's
Just get your mouth closed. Oh, just get my mouth closed?
Yes.
There you go. Okay, all righty. I usually talk very loud anyway. I graduated in 1959. And at 1959, as I think about what we were doing, the way we were taught, and what we were taught not to do, what we were taught not to do, and I see that now, I couldn't be prouder. We were not allowed to do anything. I just am so proud and happy that nurses have come so far, and they did it by helping each other and by keeping each other. Each one of you has said, my friend, my instructor. Everyone was at one point in time, and it was not in the 50s, and it was not in the 60s. But by golly, you guys have really come out and shown them that nursing is something that they should be proud of. They should continue to encourage everyone they can. Everyone. I am just absolutely stunned by what all of you have achieved. A lot through just plain grit. And a lot with helping, other people helping you. And I just can't tell you how proud I am of nursing. And one of the things that you have said that really brought me back to, gee, I wasn't allowed to do that. I could only be a nurse or a head nurse. That was it. That was it. But you're right. You're always a nurse. Thank you.
Follow that.
I know. Nancy, we'll let Nancy follow that. How about that?
I just have a funny story that speaks to Dr. Ford always wanting you to say yes and to always being a nurse. And I remember, even today, nurses take care of patients at the bedside, and some of them still need to use bedpans. And so I remember her saying, well, you should not feel that you're too good to take care of a bedpan because you know what's in there. It's a 4-letter word, and it's data.
Any other? Well, okay, then we'll get back to you.
My name is Barb Macy. I graduated in 1981 with my baccalaureate under Dean Ford's service while she was here. We had wonderful times, lots of stories to tell. I then pursued my master's in 87 and returned for my nurse practitioner certificate in 93. I'm 4 years retired happily, but I had a great experience at the university. And my question to all of you, including you, Lisa, given we're at the 100-year mark, what is the School of Nursing's vision for the next 100 years for nursing and, in particular, nurse practitioners?
Want me to take that one first? Sure. Well, first, hopefully you're going to come back at 1 o'clock or 1:30, where we're going to be talking about the state of the school and our next 100 years. And I can tell you, as a dean sitting here in this school, with such rich history and so many firsts. And sitting among alumni who have accomplished amazing things, it's sometimes intimidating to sit here, right? Because there are certainly big shoes to fill. But I think what makes me comfortable and what I love about being a dean is that innovative spirit that is part of everyone here, our faculty, our staff, our students, our incoming students that are thinking about nursing is very inspiring. And that culture continues here. So we are very hopeful on our work to continue to think about not only in a school of nursing, but I think most importantly, how an academic medical center continues to lead. And I think that is where Rochester continues to lead. That tripartite mission, that unification model, we're really thinking about education, research, and practice, and adhering to that in what is really now challenging times, right? Lee had very challenging times. We are facing challenging times in nursing and where we are now. But that focus on that tripartite mission, that unification model, is going to lead us well into the next 100 years. We have to continue to think about how nursing leads and how we embrace AI so that nursing can continue to lead. And quite honestly, get back to our roots a little bit, right? That harnessing the value of AI so that we can continue to think about how we care and improve outcomes. And maybe get away from a little bit of the tasks that I think that we have been caught up in a bit for the past several years. So we are looking forward to leading with workforce changes and integrated models of care, and really laying the foundation for the next 100 years. But I think what brings me the most pride is that we are able to recruit and retain the best and the brightest. And that is going to really lay the groundwork for us to go into the next 100 years. So thank you for that question.
I just have one short comment linking us back to Lee's vision of the future of nursing. And like Lisa said, she was always thinking forward. And right up till until she died just a short time before, she was always thinking forward. And she was always reading. And I remember at one point, we were talking about the future of healthcare, and she had been reading a book. I had to find it on my shelf when I was thinking about this possibility. She recommended a book by Eric Topol called The Patient Will See You Now. And it was a vision about how healthcare is changing and how our roles are changing, and empowering patients to be partners in their care in ways that we never grew up with thinking about. And so that for me was a vision of how her forward thinking was moving. The patient will see you now. That says something about changing roles and about technology and education, right?
Yes. And even to Meredith, right? Our patient-centered care,
Yeah.
which you talked about in your first question.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I was struck while I was sitting here. I admittedly listening to, and thank you, I think we can do what we do now because we run because you walked, as they say. So thank you. And I was struck while I was sitting here thinking about how I wasn't a nurse practitioner in the 80s. I was a child. My grandmother was a nurse, and she, so I even had healthcare in my family, but I grew up during that time where nurse practitioners were beginning to make their way. And I grew up with that message, and in eating disorder care, we always talk about the messaging we receive and undoing those messages. And I admittedly received those messages too, and I admittedly have to undo a lot of that in my own brain. And I think only is a dirty word. We are not only nurses, we are nurses. I think I am just the nurse, is not helpful to anyone, patients, families, healthcare systems included. And I admittedly, across the street, have been recently had residents shadow me in clinic when I'm seeing patients. And I think to myself, and sometimes I say it out loud, and I have to stop. Like, oh, I'm a nurse practitioner, and you're an MD, and you're shadowing me, and then I have to undo that message. Mm-hmm. And I think the future of moving us forward is undoing that message for the generation even coming up, so that they can step into more roles and into the leadership, and so that they can continue to run with the torch. And I also think that moving forward in my career, thinking about what we ask of nurses as a country. So what the country asks, or what people, the community, society asks of nurses, is to be these carers, and that is our roots, and that's what we do. And that root is such a unique and valued perspective in changing systems and answering questions. And what we ask of nurses, and what our society asks of nurses, really has to move forward and build on Dr. Ford's legacy of, we need to be part of that research. We need to be in all of those spaces, not as a nurse sitting as a consultant, but leading those spaces, because we are those carers, because we are nurses first, because we have those roots, not any other reason, but because we are who we are, and that is a perspective that we need.
Yes. Thank you. I think as you were speaking, it really provoked an image in my head, and I'll share it, because being a new secondary retiree, I'm now figuring out what am I doing? Where's my impact? And so I'm talking with a lot of people around the world, around the country, about this very thing. But then it went back to 1959, when you said you were a child in the 1980s. So I was a child in the 1950s, and I was a patient in the 1950s. And this probably is what started with nursing. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a small steel mill town where there was a VA hospital, a general hospital, and a state mental hospital outside of town. So there were a lot of nurses, who were my friends' mothers and such. So I was in the hospital getting my tonsils removed, as many people did. But I was, in a room with 6 or so beds, and I needed to go to the bathroom, and so the nurse was taking the bathroom, but one of the other kids' mother was with her, and that mother was a nurse, so the mother was able to stay with them. So the two of them took me into the bathroom, where I proceeded to, it's nurses in the room, have emetic, hemetic, vomitus, which I saw, and that's the last thing I remember, except the nurses saying, uh-oh. And I remember falling into their arms. I remember that. There you can hear. I remember that. So nurses were doing more. They were doing more. You were doing things. It's just that incredible clinical reasoning and moment of knowing what to do was there, it just wasn't recognized. It wasn't recognized, and it wasn't paid for. And there were, certain things that you couldn't, you couldn't write it on the chart, and you couldn't, but you could ask for a different order. But anyway, of course, I woke up with an IV going into my arm, and another funny story. So I'll take one because someone asked me to repeat this. I thought, oh, it's getting known that I have this story. So you wake up at night, my parents are at my bedside, and I've got my arms tied down with, IVs running into it, and there's a bottle of this red stuff up here, and this lovely nurse standing next to me and trying to explain everything, and why can't I move my arms, and looking at my parents, what are you doing here? And they're like, what do you mean, what are we doing here? Oh my gosh, my poor mother. And anyway, so later did hospital billing, but she's telling me that the nurse is telling me to give me blood. Well, as a 6 or 5-year-old, I couldn't figure out blood there, the only thing, and I said, very seriously, I don't care what you're going to do to me, but I'm not drinking that blood. So I've used that story when I do my work on restraint use in elder adults. Like even as a kid, I knew being restrained wasn't a good thing. I survived. But so the 1950s, you were still doing incredible stuff and impacting people like me and the kids that I grew up with. Maybe not as much the boys as the girls, but still that impact was there. And as you were speaking and talking about where are we going and with technology, so I consult with a major technical company in the North American continent. It's one of the companies that make BD, make all the products. And they asked me to be the nurse consultant to their nurse advisory board, which they just formed. And so I'm the advisor to the North American medical officer, because they recognize with technology that there's a lot more to it than technology, and they want to get in on that other part of it, not the, how do you, invent this thing or that thing, but they recognize that nurses are the consumers, and the medical officer, I knew at NYU, he was married to the dean of education, who was a colleague of mine, and personally friends, dean partners as you go through, and that's how I'm there. But there was like this thing that's happening right now in healthcare. If you think of a river that reworks itself into the delta, but it's reforming, nursing is like that river. We are showing up more and more everywhere, not just as nurses, but as the must-go-to people. We are now the must-go-to people for everything, and they're beginning to recognize that, they being the controllers of the levers and the money and the power. And we have been wonderfully preparing nurses for this role for a long time, and you're all just going to keep stepping into it. So it's just going to flip, so that, as Maggie McClure says, the only reason you're in a hospital is because you need nursing care. So it's, I think it's just happening, and so we need to keep that river moving in ways where it wants to move, but it's going there, really influential right now, and because of the trust and the knowledge and the preparation.
Thank you. I want to pick up on something that has been suggested and goes along with our focusing on nurses as the independent practitioners that we are. And that's that with all of the vision that Lee had for nursing, for her from the moment she created the nurse practitioner role with Henry Silver, a physician, it was always a partnership. When she came to Rochester, Eileen mentioned her office was over with what she called the big boys. And she made her vision for nursing known by her presence. She loved to tell the story of rounding on Saturdays. And physicians would ask her, why are you here? And she would say, well, I'm rounding just like you. These are my nurses. But there was tremendous respect and friendship between Lee and physicians in this university, in this medical center. Many were her friends, her partners. We, in the early days, were taught, now I say we, but the nurse practitioners were taught equally by physicians. Our programs were partnerships. We had tremendous support from physicians here in bringing the programs up. And that was inspirational for me because, and pardon me for going back as a 60-year alum, but when I was an undergraduate here, Joe Crater, whom I mentioned, created an opportunity for me, building on my junior experience in working in an old-fashioned outpatient clinic where I saw a young man. You know what you did in those days, you sat in the waiting room and you talked to folks before they went in to see the doctor, and I learned a lot about that particular patient. He was what we called in those days a brittle diabetic. And the physician saw me out there and he said, you know, like this with his finger. And I said, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And I went in and he said, what are you doing out there? And I said, well, I'm learning a lot about the patient. And, you know, what his life is like, what his challenges are like. He said, I'll tell you what, from now on, before I see the patient, you come in and tell me what you're learning. And then we'll see that person together. In my senior year, she created an opportunity for me to do that for a whole semester. So when I came back here and we started to roll out Lee's vision, it was a partnership. And it felt comfortable to me because when I went into sociology as a graduate student, and I had the opportunity to observe, not in this city, but in another city where I went to grad school, a clinic or a visit between, which was advertised as teamwork, an encounter between a young patient, his mother, a physician, a nurse, and I was supposed to write a paper about teamwork, and I said to my sociology professor, that's not teamwork. Let me tell you why it's not teamwork. And so when I came back here, I came back home. And that was the beginning for me of my own career advocating for interprofessional care. And that has always been an important agenda it was for Lee, it was for our early days, and I hope it continues.
So I have one question that I want to get to, and Maddie and Eileen, probably this question is for each of you. Maddie, you were here in the early days when Lee created the PhD program or instituted the PhD program here. We're now, many years later, looking at, historical declines in PhD enrollments across nursing. And, if you ask me perhaps what kept me up at night as a dean, there are many things, but this is one, right, where we see a decline in PhD admissions, the impact on nursing science. Talk about your thoughts as being here, maybe full circle when the PhD program was started, insights on what Lee or what we should be doing in order to reinvigorate PhD education.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is. I saved it to the end, right? Yes.
Well, it's always been a struggle to attract PhD students in nursing. And for all the good that the DMP programs have done, I think there is in nursing's minds now a choice between DNP and PhD. I grew up in a generation of hyphenated professionals. That's what my sociologist friends call us. As I mentioned, nurse physiologists, nurse psychologists, nurse sociologists. They were called fields allied to nursing, and for a good reason, because all of those are relevant to what we do. And when we first started the PhD program here, we had a series of seminars, and the research that we were able to feature was the research of those nurses who were asking questions about care that nobody else thought about asking. We could draw on that research, and we could elevate it, we could recognize it, we could say, yeah, there's other information out there that's relevant. I think we've lost some of that. We've brought up the research skills, and we've brought up good research training. One of the things that we've always done here is good research training. But I think when we become myopic and we don't look outwards and what's happening around us and what's relevant to us, we lose some of that edge. But I also think, I don't know what I think about it. I'm 20 years retired now, so it's a challenge, but it's never been easy to get nurses into PhD programs. When I was directing the doctoral program here, it was not easy to find folks in nursing who committed themselves to a research career. And we've always been a small group here in the, I remember back to when we were trying to develop our research skills at the doctoral level. When I came, I was the person on the faculty who had the most research training, and it took me 4 years to finish my PhD after I came here in 1972, because we were busy doing, rolling out master's nurse practitioner programs and building a national vision. And research came last. Not the least, but last, because it wasn't under demand, it wasn't developed. And every school was looking for doctoral training. So we did it, and we still do it with a relatively small cadre of people. But the questions are so important. The questions that nobody else is going to ask. I don't know what the answer is, but it's always been a struggle. So.
Yeah, good answer. Again, on the radio show yesterday, Dr. Julie Fairman was on, who led the Robert Wood Johnson review of a PhD, of a 3-year PhD program, and tested that around the country just as the DNP was emerging. And Beth was asked, I asked Beth to explain the difference between DNP and PhD to the audience, and Julie complimented her to say it was one of the best explanations that that she's heard people give to the point. And exactly, so that's to say Rochester has you have leaders here who are thinking clearly, and it is that, I think, discernment about research, and now we have a DNP, which is implementation, et cetera. But Lisa, like you, I mean, I was dean at NYU. NYU had the first PhD nursing program in the country. And we are struggling just as you are, and why is that? And we have only started, while I was dean, to introduce DNP programs. Now all the programs have them. We had to go through, as you know, in New York State, all the different, we had so many different master programs registered in Albany that we had to like consolidate those before we could put a DNP in place. So NYU had a very unique setup. But anyway, we did all of that work and now we're moving ahead. But do we have enough people being prepared with PhDs to then deliver more PhDs in nursing, I think is a concern as much as anything. We may have to go back to the hybrid of aligned fields, but maybe that is true for all higher ed. So these, I would feel better as a dean when I would go to meetings across the university and hear that this is, the PhD question is a question across the whole university and how PhD students are treated. And of course, our PhD students at NYU are unionized. And so what are the implications around that? And some of it had to do with the fact, not so much in nursing, but the PhD students were, paid poorly, didn't have benefits, didn't have leave, maternal health leave. We were giving that all at the School of Nursing anyway. So that all had to be readjusted. And so again, I think we need to reassure ourselves that it's not just nursing struggling with the PhD question, everyone's struggling with the PhD question. And what is higher ed? I mean, if you think of liberal arts and you think of PhDs in art history or PhDs in other, my daughter-in-law's in one, what is all of that value? So we have to keep talking about the right questions, why the science, and I think it will come because increasingly I hear of people who are doing both DNP and PhD. But is the money there for them to do that? So part of it is economy. But I think we just need to keep turning the wheel and keep it alive. And I keep asking AACN to really do an analysis of the demography. Because one of the reasons there were PhDs is there were more boomers who could afford to go back in their 35 plus years to get PhDs, and there's not that same number of people in nursing now to do it. So you're one of the exceptions, but we need more people like you coming up from their 20s to see that as the next wave. So I think we need to catch that wave.
Maddie, go ahead. Meredith. Oh, go ahead. Okay. I just wanted to say one more thing about our history here, which is before we had the doctoral program here, and we were in that first cohort of 15, I believe it was, doctoral programs that followed the 3 that were in existence at NYU, at Pittsburgh, and there was a third one that I'm sorry.
Maybe Florida. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think it was Boston.
Oh,
anyway, yeah.
Boston University. Yes.
We, in the era that Eileen grew up in here, we didn't have the doctoral program, but we had high expectations for research at the master's level. And that's the era that Eileen grew up in, and I think that research experience as part of the nurse practitioner program was critical. They were coupled, and then Lee was very instrumental in saying we need to move out with doctoral level education here. And then we went to the NP PhD program, and understandably, once people got their NP degree at the master's level, they wanted to practice. And so stepped out of that combined opportunity. Some of them did, some went on. But I think looking at the road ahead versus the opportunity to practice, and then continue leadership in practice, that's the DNP came along. I think these are big questions in where we go in the future.
Not to be too on the nose, and this is certainly not the only answer, but because there are all the challenges that Dr. Sullivan has outlined a minute ago, but I do think that the unification model really is the way forward because it reduces some of that, you're a researcher, I'm a clinician. We're all here together doing, when you do all three, when you practice in all three pillars, you realize how interconnected they are, and it reduces some of that, well, I'm a nurse and you're a researcher. I'm a nurse too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Good. So this time has gone by way too quickly. We need to think about how we continue to do this in the future. So a closing question I have for each of you, as in a short phrase, what do you think Lee Ford would want every nurse or healthcare leader to remember from her legacy? Ooh.
I'm stuck with it. It's
the hot
potato. I got stuck with it. I think it would be what we're seeing right here in this room today is that the continued open conversation and engagement of a collection of important questions that Lisa and your leadership have put together to generate a wonderful conversation, have her family here. I think that's what she would want to see continue, because out of this openness and freedom of expression, people who are asking questions, who are alum, people who are going to be new students, that's what Lee would want to have happen. And not to take that for granted, but I've been in a lot of other institutions in addition to Rochester, and Rochester still remains a place where I can identify that I really formed the rest of my career. And I think that exists here differently than it exists any other place, that have their own cultures and their own way of doing it. But the uniqueness here is what she would want to see continue.
I think she would say, don't be afraid of challenges. And look to the future and look to be an innovator. I want to say that the person who should be here where I am is Harriet Kitzman. I miss Harriet greatly. Harriet was, and I'm going to say this in a very positive way, Harriet was Lee's partner in crime. And remember, Lee spoke and quoted Machiavelli in her first address that she gave here at Rochester. So you can put those two together, but I think she would say, don't be afraid of challenges, go for it. And you saw that in all the words that you came up with to describe her. Move forward, keep the vision going.
I think that all of Dr. Ford's legacy is just that, keep moving forward, be innovative, be leaders, push the boundaries, be visionary. And what she said in that tribute video was the underscore of all of that is that we have a lot of work to do. And so, not to be also a little too on point, but I think that her legacy, and if I had to, it's not her word, but if I had to sum it in a phrase, I would say it would be Meliora, ever better.
Thanks to each of you. This has been very, I think we accomplished our goals, that we paid tribute to Lee, and we're paying tribute and laying the foundation for our next 100 years. I'm so grateful for each of you for taking the time to be part of this panel, to reflect on our past and lay the groundwork for our future. And thanks. Thank you.